Welcome to the Book Flood Podcast. I am your host, Tom Nixon. Our guest today is Dr. Steve Tetreault. Steve is the creator of the School Library Learning Network and the SLLN podcast. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, Tom. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Let's start by talking a little bit about your career trajectory. You've been a school librarian for quite a long time.
Just a little while, actually. I've been in education for a real long time. I started out as a teacher, and I started in education in 1998. I've been in my current school since 1999, and I was an English teacher for decades. And then at some point, my school librarian, he was out for a couple of weeks. He was like, hey, during your preps, do you want to come in and just kind of keep an eye on the library, and make sure everything's okay? I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? And it was just a really interesting experience to just be in there and kind of like interacting with the students in a different way than in the English classroom. And he came back, he was like, so how'd it go? I was like, oh, it was really fun. He's like, well, I've been thinking about retiring in a couple of years. Like, you think this might be something you want to do? I was like, it literally never occurred to me in 20 something years that maybe this is where I want to be. But as soon as he put the idea in my head, I was like, oh, of course this is where I want to be. Like, this is where all the good stuff is going on. And so I started the program, got my certificate to become a school librarian in January of 2019. And from starting around 2016, I started becoming what I called a hobbyist librarian, because I was kind of like all involved in different kinds of library stuff, even though I was still teaching in the classroom.
Sure.
So got the degree in 2019, and that was when they were doing a big renovation on our building. And they said, you know what? We don't have the money that we were going to use to renovate the library. So instead, the library is going to become science labs. So we're just going to not have a library in our middle school because we're connected to a high school. So the students can just go over and use the high school library. And that didn't work out great. It's literally a 5-minute walk from the English wing of the middle school to the high school library. So 5 minutes there and 5 minutes back is a quarter of your class time just evaporated before you've even had a chance to look at anything,
Well, and also, so I was a middle school librarian as well. And so 5 minutes there and 5 minutes back for a high school student might be something. For a middle school student, that's a whole something else.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was, and I understood that the English teachers just weren't. I was still an English teacher at the school, and I was like, I'm not bringing my students over there just because there's not enough time in the day to make it work. And the high school librarian had an entire high school to deal with. Like, he didn't really have the time he wasn't going to be able to come over and visit our school very easily. So we basically just went without for a couple of years. And I eventually talked to the library supervisor, somebody that I had known for a while. And I'd said, what if we think about having like me be the library liaison for the middle school? And like, I can go over to the high school and bring stuff to the teachers, or I can like go to classrooms and do stuff and like, maybe bring a little bit of library-ness to a school that doesn't have a library. And so that turned into a year and a half of trying to make that happen. But eventually, January 2022, I finally got into a library. 23, 22. The years all start to blend together. But it was only a couple of years ago that I actually got into a library after years of hobbyist librarianing and going to different conferences. And, really just as soon as I started my classes, I knew that the school library was the place that all the real authentic learning was going on. There's no testing. There's no projects. There's come in and do the things you want to do, explore the things you want to explore. And that's, to my mind, that's what education should be. And so once that switch flipped in my head, I was like, I'm all in on the library. And the past couple of years, I've been rebuilding. Our vice principal became our principal. And she said, we really need a library in the school. I was like, oh, yeah, we do.
Oh,
yeah.
Don't you appreciate leaders like that?
So good. And she's been so great at just offering whatever support she can. So now we've got an actual physical space in the school. It's not as big as most libraries, but we've got shelves, we've got books, the kids come in. So we're making do with what we got, and the kids are really enjoying it. So, it's been a little bit of a journey to get there, but it's all going and it's all very exciting stuff. So we're having a good time now.
Oh, excellent. Let's talk a little bit about the role of advocacy. Clearly, you were an advocate for yourself and for your students and for your teachers in having a library. We're living in interesting times for libraries and librarians. How do you view the role of librarians in all of this with regard to advocacy?
Man, I mean, it's real tough because often we're the only ones in the building. A lot of us don't even have support of an aide or something like that. Like we are completely on our own. And, just doing your own job within the confines of the library is a full-time job. But then there's so many
Right.
people who don't understand like what goes on in a modern library program. And it just boggles my mind how many people had like mediocre experiences with libraries throughout their school career because when I look around now, I look at this field of school librarianship, like I see these just every place I look, these all-stars are doing amazing stuff in their
Right.
libraries all the time, and kids are engaged and like there's always people coming to visit and stuff going on. And it's so awesome. And yet somehow so few people seem to have been through those kinds of programs when they were younger, especially the decision makers these days that are making the decisions about do we have the money for school libraries? And it's like before I became a school librarian, I spent some time getting an administration and supervision degree.
Mm,
And one of the main things they drilled into our heads in admin and supervision is you've got to spend your money wisely. Like you've got to make every penny count.
right.
And so I look at some of these decisions that get made about, oh, we don't have the money for a school library program. I'm like, that's the low hanging fruit. Like, that's the easiest way to make a huge impact on your school for the least amount of money. Like the school library, best return on investment in the school. So when I see these programs that are getting shut down, I'm like, you don't understand what you're doing. Like, and so it kind of falls on the librarian to become our own advocates. Like we've really got to get out and not just let our administrators know or let the students know or let the teachers know. It really becomes like getting out into the wider world and helping the parents to understand what the school library program is about and the
Mm,
community and even like reaching upward to your local legislators and letting them know. A couple of years ago, I was on a Zoom call with one of our state legislators as part of our state library organization. We were talking about some bills we were hoping that they would bring to the education committee. And the head of the education committee had said, we were kind of talking about, well, we've got maker spaces and we've got reading programs and we've got, this and that. And we're kind of going through all these different things that a good modern library program has. And at some point he said, wait, hold on. Libraries do that? And we were
right.
like, okay, so now we know where the disconnect is. So it's it's an unfortunate reality that not enough people know what a good library program is. So I think it kind of falls on us.
Well, it's interesting. When I started as a librarian out here, um, a little bit, you're a recipient of whoever had the job last and the job before that. Libraries are a collection of visions, if you will.
Mm.
And I realized I had something special going on for me when people would say, "What, you do that?" I'm just doing trust me, I'm in the program at Fresno Pacific University, which is a lovely program then and now, but I was just sort of copying with, "Oh, this is a good thing to do. Okay, I'll do that,"
Right.
And then when you start getting the questions about what you can do that for our class and what you can teach them research skills and,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes it's the other way. Sometimes you're following up after someone who was a genius. And so it can go both ways for sure.
But it's definitely like you're saying, even the teachers sometimes don't even realize what a
Right.
resource they have in a school library. And unfortunately, sometimes you are stepping into a space where there hasn't been a strong program. So there's not even an understanding of what a library can be. And so
Mm.
that's when that school level advocacy becomes super important and reaching out to the teachers and getting those collaborations going so that they understand like I am here not just for the students, I'm here for the teachers. Like I'm here for all of you to use this space.
Oh, exactly. Something from one of your articles. Why should librarians be Luddites?
Yeah. So, you know, that kind of grew out of a couple of different conversations online. I am very much into technology. I was one of the ones that got our district into becoming a Google for Education school, like way back in the day. I was literally one of the first people in the district to use email with like on a regular professional basis. Like it blows my mind to be able to say that because it's like a million years ago now.
Right.
So I am a very technology forward person, but lately, we're seeing a lot of technology being used by students, by staff, but by students mostly, that I feel like is not serving it's not serving the students well. It's not serving an educational purpose. It's not serving a strong social purpose. And there's some harms that I'm starting to see coming out of some of this
Mm,
technology. And just coincidentally, I listen to podcasts all the time, and I had
right.
heard one, and I think it might have been 99% Invisible, and they did an episode. It's a design podcast, but they talk about how design affects our world. And they had talked about the Luddites, and they were talking about the true history of the Luddites. And whenever I hear that term, my first thought is, oh, those people who hated technology and smashed, broke into factories and smashed stuff.
Right.
And it turns out that the actual history, there's a lot more going on there. Like when you look at the context of why they were doing what they were doing, the Luddites were actually really good at using technology, and they were worried that the technology that was being presented at that time was causing social harms. It was harming the most vulnerable. It was harming the people who
Mm,
were least able to stand up to it was factory owners who were putting in all these different automated systems that were taking jobs away, that were hurting the communities, that were creating pollution. And so this group of workers got together and said, look, we know how to use this stuff, but we're telling you it is bad for our community. It's bad for the people. It's bad for this area. And the factory owners were like, tough. We're going to save money by using this stuff. And so that's when the Luddites started breaking into these factories and busting stuff up, was
mm,
not because they hated the technology, but because they saw the harms the technology was doing.
mm.
And so I think it's very important as school librarians, we tend to be the ones who are on the front lines of the educational technology that's coming into the schools, whether because we put ourselves there or we get assigned like, hey, this is now for you to figure out. And that's fine. That's great. But I think it's important when we're in that position to think carefully about what is it that we are letting through the school doors. What are these technologies about? What are they doing? Where are they coming from? And as there's more and more studies coming out about how some technologies are starting to affect students and people generally, there's some
Right.
real negatives associated with some of these technologies. And so I
Are
think
you
it's very
thinking
important.
artificial intelligence? You think AI is a thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think AI is a big
Mhm.
one. Even cell phones. Like for a while, cell
Right.
phones were like, oh man, these are great. Like kids can use them in class if we don't have a one-to-one computer or whatever. But now we're starting to see like just the distraction factor of having that phone all the time. When you look at studies, just having a phone makes you less able to focus. Not even looking at the phone, just having it nearby makes your brain go, I should check that. I should check that. And makes you less
And
able
we're
to
not
focus.
talking just students here.
Oh no, not at all. I
Yeah.
do it all the time too.
Right.
Like there's addictive elements built into using a lot of different technologies these days. AI has a lot of things going on with it that don't seem to get talked about a lot in when people are sort of pushing for the implementation in schools. And so I actually wrote a chapter in a book called Radical School Librarianship, edited by Judy Morellian, and it just came out recently. And
Mm,
my chapter is why school librarians should be Luddites, because I think it's really important that we think about this. And I used AI as sort of my, not a case study, but sort of examples of like, when we're
right.
thinking about how it works this way or that way, like these are things that we should be doing. Is the technology doing these things for us, or is it undermining those ideas, those ideals? So I think it's just important not to, I don't think we should not use technology, but I think we need to be thoughtful about what the technology does and how we're bringing it in.
Makes so much sense. I can see such positive uses for AI on the teacher side, on the school psychologist side, on the sped teacher side. Absolutely. There are some negatives there for sure.
There definitely
And
are.
for students, even more so.
Well, and I think one of the problems, one of the biggest, I have a lot of problems with AI. I'm not going to lie. I am a big AI skeptic, but one problem that I think is a particularly pernicious one for our students is AI. The way it works is it finds, like, you ask it for something and it says, okay, this word, when I look at all the data I've looked at, this is the word that would most logically come after the word I already said. And it just builds like a chain of words based on what is most likely to appear based on the data sets it's looked at. In doing that, it creates these responses that sound really good. They
Oh,
sound like
yeah.
they make sense, but they don't always make sense. And the problem is, if you're not a content area expert in whatever you're asking AI about, you may not know that the answer it's giving you is completely ridiculous because it sounds good.
The very first question I asked ChatGPT, because I was in a training for curriculum instruction department at
Hmm.
my previous employer, and they said, "Okay, just type something in." And I said, "Okay." And I asked a question about one of my mentors, who is very much alive, by the way, still an older gentleman, and ChatGPT killed him off. And so right away, I began to, okay, okay,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know, you want to treat this carefully.
Hmm.
This could be, actually, I think it can be a good starting point as long as you understand that what comes out of it is not necessarily true.
Yes. And like again, students aren't going to always know. Like that's why they're students because they don't know a lot of stuff, you know.
Right.
One of my first experiences, I asked AI to build me a word search for The Outsiders. Not a word
Oh,
search, a crossword. And so it spits out this crossword and it's got all the clues and I'm looking through the clues and I'm trying to figure out what the answers are. And it says the main villain of The Outsiders. And so I'm looking at the clue and I'm like, there's not the right number of letters there for any character, for any character group. And so it spit out a key and I'm looking at the key and it says the main antagonist of The Outsiders is the evil wolves. And I'm like, there are no
you
evil
remember that
wolves.
scene?
Yeah, right. And like again, if a student is using this as their way to get around reading the book or whatever, they're going to get who knows what instead of actually getting the knowledge or the experience or the information they need. So, again, lots of things that I feel like we should really be thinking carefully about before we bring this through the front doors of the school. But there's, I think I'm starting to see more folks starting to go, oh, wait a minute. Yeah,
Right.
maybe that's not as good. But we'll
You
see. We'll see how
know,
it goes.
I can make an argument either way depending on the day.
Hmm.
You know, for the overworked classroom teacher, give me a 50-minute lesson on blank. Okay. But you have the background knowledge to go, okay, yeah, I can use this, or you have the background knowledge to go, well, I need to tweak this.
Yeah.
But it's very different for a lot of folks.
Hmm. Hmm. And I mean, maybe getting those ideas as a starting point is
Mhm.
it's great for that. But one of the conversations we're actually having in my school right now is what should our level of AI use with students be?
Oh,
And several of the teachers are saying, we're in middle school, and they're saying, our students don't have the basic foundation skills that they
right.
need in order to correctly evaluate and use what might come out of an AI program. So we're not sure our students should be using it at middle school age, which I think there's a very strong argument to be made there. But
I would
we're going to see, how things shake out. Where we're just at the very beginning stages of that conversation, and I'm hoping that it's going to involve a lot of the teachers, and it's going to involve some of the administrators. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to find a common ground that everybody can agree on. But there's a lot of different pressures out there pushing for it to be included in different ways and in different areas, and so who knows? We're going to see kind of how it shakes out.
mm, interesting conversation for sure. So here's my The Outsiders side note for you. My program director at Fresno Pacific University was a librarian named Joellen Masakian, and she is the librarian that sent The Outsiders to Francis Ford Coppola with a petition from her students, and they ended up making the movie. I mean, you
Very
can follow
cool.
this. She's been a guest at some things, and she was a guest at the Broadway performance of this. Amazing woman.
Oh, that's really something, man.
Truly
That's a
amazing,
being a piece of history right there.
right? Digital awareness versus digital natives. How do you make that distinction?
So that was another chapter I wrote for a different book. We were talking about,
I've been stalking you.
yeah, oh no, it's great. Yeah, the book is We Can Teach That, edited by Eva Elliott, and it's about how it's how school librarians can work with information literacy skills. And
Mm,
so in that chapter, I talked a little bit about, I called it moving from digital natives to digital awareness. So for a while, there was sort of this idea that our students were digital natives, that they were growing up
mm,
in a world surrounded by digital tools, and therefore that imparted on them some kind of digital wisdom, and like they were able to use technology in ways that we would never be able to. And so, we needed to ask them to teach us how to use the technology. And that fortunately has sort of fallen out of favor as a term
Yeah.
to address students, which I think is great. I think instead of them, I don't think they were ever digital natives. Like, we live in an analog world. We don't live in a digital world. So I don't think you can
Right.
be a digital native. And when we come from the analog world, we may use digital tools, and students use digital tools on a pretty regular basis, but they're often using them on a very surface level, and they
Sure.
are very unaware of what those tools do, how they function, why they work the way they work, how they do the things they do. And I think that puts them at a disadvantage. Like, they use this little tiny slice. Like, if you want them to make a TikTok video, they can make that TikTok video in no time. But do
Right.
they know, like, what are TikTok's user policies? And where is TikTok? Where is their home company located? And how is your phone even creating that video in the first place? And how's it going into the internet somewhere? And it's out, like, and it's not that we need to have every single answer to every one of those questions in order to use this tool, but it really adds a lot to your understanding of how technology works when you've got at least a basic grounding in sort of the infrastructure of a lot of the tools and the technologies that we use. And so I think it's really important that we move ourselves and our students away from this idea of anybody being digital natives and move
Right.
more into, we need to help people be aware of, we are surrounded by technology. It's actually hard these days to get away from technology. And, there's pros and cons to that, but understanding sort of the fundaments and the underlying structures that make up the internet, that make up how a computer works. During the pandemic, when everybody was online, how many times did I have to explain to students, okay, if you're in the basement of your house and the router that your Wi-Fi is coming from is in the attic and you keep dropping out during class, you need to get closer to the Wi-Fi router. And like, well, what does that look like? I don't even know. Like, they just take it for granted that there's a signal and it just works. And so, like, they don't understand some of those real basic things. And not just the students, like, there's absolutely adults out there that maybe don't understand some of the basics. And just having some
You'd
of
be
those.
hard pressed at elementary schools now to find even, a keyboarding class, which
Absolutely.
is something they're absolutely going to need for the rest of their lives.
100%.
But we made determinations. Well, they're digital natives and they can do this and well, some social media stuff, they are absolutely ahead of me, for sure. But that's such a narrow part of technology.
Yeah. And I'd even argue that in that social media stuff that you think they're ahead of you on, they may be better at posting stuff, but do they understand what a digital footprint is? Do they
Right.
understand how to limit the access to the posts that they make? Do they understand how to, there's just all these elements that they're
And the
probably not
answers are
aware of.
no and no.
Exactly. Right. And so,
Right.
but they know what they know, like, just they do it a million times. And so it's just hardwired into their brain, like, how to post stuff. But it's that additional depth of understanding of how this works, and like, what are they exposing themselves to when they are posting online? Like,
Mm,
it's not a conversation that they have. I think it's one adults need to have, and we need to have it with the students as well, to kind of say, like,
right.
look, when you're throwing stuff out in the void, I shudder to think, like, if I was growing up these days, when I was a preteen and a teen, if I had documented all of my angst and horrors, and just,
Oh my.
like, looking back on that would have been horrifying. And like, having employers look back on all of the mistakes I made when I was a kid, like, it's not something I ever had to think about. These kids kind of need to think about that. Like, you can make a dumb mistake offline and no one knows about it except you and whoever was around. You make a mistake online, it's there forever. So it becomes a real issue. And again, I don't think kids really have those conversations. And it's hard to find the time in school to have those
Right.
conversations, you know? So again, that's a place I think school librarians, working either as the digital point person for the school, or even just in conjunction with other teachers throughout the school, like, I think we're in a position to be able to talk to the students about this kind of stuff, get them thinking a little bit about, oh, what am I doing when I interact with these different digital tools?
Mm. Tell us about the school library learning network.
So yeah, the School Librarian Learning Network grew out of basically the pandemic when everybody went online, and all of a sudden there were like a million free professional developments that you could go to, and like all this different cool stuff was going on. It was awesome. I was working with our state professional development committee, and we were putting out stuff that anybody anywhere could come, dial in and come be part of our professional development. And lots of states were doing that. Like lots of state
Hmm.
organizations were saying, we're going to do this thing since we can't get together in person. We're going to do it digitally. Come and join us. Like wherever you're at. It was so great. But it was so hard to find what's going on when. Like you had to be on this list and that list and the other list, and you had to be
Right.
checking all these different channels a million times. Also, people were putting out all these resources so that you didn't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, I made this whole digital toolkit for manga. I made this whole digital toolkit for research. And they were sharing them out because everybody was just doing whatever we could to help each other out during the pandemic.
Right.
And again, resources aplenty, but like you had to know a person had shared it out in order to find it. So I was just kind of sitting around one day. I was like, it'd be awesome if there was a place where this could all just, you could kind of coordinate some of this or like get it all in one place. So it was a one-stop shop. And I was like, if no one else is doing it, I mean, I got nothing better going on this weekend. Let me throw up a website. So throw up a website, started grabbing whatever I could find, started throwing it together. And for a while, people were really, finding it useful to be, I had a calendar set up that you could click and it had the link for the resource or the whatever was going on, had a couple pages for resource like pages other people had put together. You could click and go and see what was going on. So yeah, that kind of became it was just sort of a side project that I was like, I wish somebody would do this. And I'm the kind of person, if somebody goes, if I say to myself, I wish somebody would do this and nobody's doing it, I feel like I have to jump in. Like I have to at least
Right.
try to get something going. And if somebody comes along and does a better version, that's great. Like I don't begrudge them at all. But like it just was a thing that I was like, why not? Because I was talking to like people all over the country. Like I was very fortunate to have fallen in right around that time with Casey Boyd out of DC
Mm.
and Amanda Jones out of Louisiana and Amy Herman, who also has an amazing podcast, School Librarians United.
Right.
Just there were a group of us, Stacy Nunn out of Maryland. And we were just kind of like, we would touch base with each other and we were sort of like involved in what was going on in our areas. And so we'd be like, our state's doing this thing if you want to come and join. And so it just became relatively easy to just start grabbing all that stuff and centrally locating it. And so that was sort of where the School Librarian Learning Network came from. It was sort of like PLN is your professional learning network. So
Sure.
School Librarian Learning Network, SLLN in my head made sense. It's a terrible name. I should have changed it almost immediately, but it's a real mouthful. That was sort of the genesis of it. It's sort of fallen a little bit on the back burner these days because I've got a couple of other things going down, but that was sort of the starting point of the SLLN website.
So tell us about those couple other things. What you got going on?
Well, I've been writing for Knowledge Quest for a while now, and
Hmm.
that's not a huge time sink, but it's, it takes some time. And I also started doing a podcast, and it was sort of it was a real happenstance sort of a thing. When School Library Connection, the magazine, was still in operation, they were doing a podcast, and Courtney Pentland out of
Hmm.
Nebraska was the host of this podcast. It was called One Lesson at a Time. And it was Courtney talking to a school librarian who had shared a lesson plan or a lesson plan for something that they did in their library. And you could listen to the podcast and then you could go to the website and like download the lesson plan and you could go and do the lesson. And it was, I mean, when I heard about it, I was like, what an awesome idea. Everybody's always out there sharing stuff. This is a great way to kind of get that one-on-one time with that person who created the lesson and hear them talk through, like, here's where it came from and here's why I did it this way. And like, if I had to do it differently, here's what I'd change. And then have that resource, like have that lesson plan in front of you that you can take and go and make your own. So she did the first season of that. And then she got too busy to go on for season 2. And so they were looking for a new host. And so I applied to be the host
Mm.
and ended up getting the job. So I did that for 2 seasons. I think it was 2 seasons, season and a half. And then SLC kind of went
Right.
defunct. So which was a bummer. But I really enjoyed having that opportunity to talk to people from all over the place about here's a cool thing I'm doing in my library. And So I was like, I could just keep doing this. Like there's no reason I have to stop.
Right.
So I talked to Amy Herman, and because her podcast she's been doing for a long time, and I was like, look, how
Yeah.
do you do what you do? I told her I'm thinking about doing a podcast. It's going to be like this. What do I need to know? And so she walked me through some different stuff, and I was like, might as well just try it. Like, why not? So I reached out to a couple of friends. I said, hey, you want to come share something? It's going to be like one lesson at a time. But since I already made the School Librarian Learning Network website, let's make it the School Librarian Learning Network podcast. So the SLLN podcast is born, and now we're at episode 55 or something like that, as of a
Nice.
couple weeks ago. And it's just, I have such a good time doing it. And it's just, I love having these kind of conversations. Like I truly, truly love school librarianship and school libraries. And so getting to talk to other school librarians about what they do and like the lesson that they love, the lesson they want to share, the lesson they want other people to know about, or program or an activity that they do with their kids, it's just the greatest. Like we just geek out about school library stuff. And I added an element that wasn't in the One Lesson at a Time podcast. At the end, we have a book break and we just geek out about a book that they want people to know about. Like, and it could be like
Oh,
something for your
nice.
library, or it could be just like, I'm reading this cool book and it's not for students in any way, shape, or form, but it's a really awesome story. And here's it is. And so it's just, it's the stuff I love to talk about. And that's why it exists is I just record these conversations that I would have with people anyway and throw them out in the world so other people can hopefully take advantage of them. So that's kind of where that came from.
Nice. You are quite active on social media. Do you think that helps your library career? Does that make you a better librarian?
Honestly, I really think it does. I was very anti social media until I started grad school for my school library program. And in one of my courses, the professor said, you have to go on social media and you have to post whatever it was, like 5 times this semester, just about things that you're thinking about. I was like, fine. So I went on Twitter. I've never been a Facebook person. I had a Twitter account that I used like maybe half a dozen times over 5 or 6 years. Never went on it. I was like, if I have to do this for a grade, fine, I'll go on. I did some posts, and the professor had put together a list of hashtags to follow, like, oh, check out school librarians, check out TL chat. And so I started, clicking on some of those to see like what kind of stuff came up. And I was blown away by how much stuff people were sharing.
Right.
Just like ideas, but like, here's a link to an entire LibGuide that I did about, this lesson we're doing in school, or like, here's a slide deck that I did for this presentation, if you want to be able to go through and, use the resources. And it was just amazing to me to see these people just giving and giving and giving to each other. And so I very quickly fell down a school library social media rabbit hole and became a very prolific poster on Twitter, X. When
Mm.
that started going sideways, I moved over to Blue Sky, and I encouraged a lot of school librarians to come over to Blue Sky. And we've got a pretty good population over there now of school librarians that are posting. It's just, for me, it's a chance to reach out with ideas. Just yesterday, I reached out and I said, great brain, I'm thinking about having parent volunteers come in. What do I need to think about? And like people had thrown out some stuff like, don't think about, don't worry about this part, but make sure you look at this and don't forget to ask them about that. And like gave me some great suggestions that like a couple of things that I had been thinking, but a couple of things like just caught me completely out of left field. So it absolutely has made me better that I can ask questions, get answers. It has made me better to see what other people are doing. Like even when people just post pictures, even if they don't write stuff or post links to things, just a picture of a library, sometimes that's all like this inspiration, and it's just, oh, that display is awesome. I got to do something like that in my space. So I have found social media in a very limited way to be a very wonderful tool for my professional learning.
Hmm.
And one of the things I love about Blue Sky is you can get a feed, which is basically like it only shows you posts about certain topics. So
Right.
there are a couple of school library channels for feeds. So when I go on, I'm not looking at the 8,000 like recommended for you, and here's the latest news, and here's the craziness that's happening in the world right now. Like my mental health can't handle that stuff.
Right.
So when I go on, it's strictly like, here is school library stuff, and that's all we're talking about. And I'm like, oh, this is just chef's kiss, like just the sweet spot that I need when I need that little bit of extra idea or when I want to just share something out there to get some feedback on. So, yeah, I have found social media to be a pretty useful tool in that way.
I've made, both for the podcast and for myself, I made the switch over to Blue Sky Social and not ever looking back at Twitter, X, whatever it is this week, because it just went south.
Oh, yeah.
But I've been really pleased for a lot of the reasons you describe with Blue Sky.
And every once in a while, like we get a new influx of people, and I'm not sure what it is that's like bringing these little rushes, but every so often I'll see like a bunch of new faces pop up in the school library area. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like, I love that people are coming to it because right now there's so many different places people go. Like there's Instagram. Some people are still on Facebook. Some people are still on X. And I'm like, you do you do what works for you. But
Right,
man, one of the things I miss about that community on Twitter was it was huge. Like
right.
basically everybody was there. And so
Yeah,
now we're sort of fragmented across these different platforms. It's like, it's still good, but it's not like it was in the heyday, you know? So
for sure.
we get what we can
Uh,
get though.
I think it's helped a little bit that ALA is there now and AASL is there now.
Hmm.
And for us out in California, CSLA is there now. But you're right. It is certainly different.
It is. And the thing that I had hoped people would jump into Blue Sky as their replacement for Twitter because it is so
Hmm.
similar. Like it's got so many similar functions, but it doesn't have all the same functions and doesn't have all the same functionality. And some people need some of that functionality, especially with some of the privacy settings that
Right.
Twitter had back in the day that maybe not as much anymore. But, and I totally get that and I respect that. Like I know that there are some people who are really just, they can't go online without taking a beating from 8,000 different directions. So like I totally understand that, but I had hoped that Blue Sky might be that easy replacement for a lot of folks. And
Mm,
it's been so-so. But one of the things I love is they keep adding different features every so often. So like they'll ask, what do you want next? And they'll listen to what the majority of the folks have to say and try and add those features. So it's
yeah, I
really
definitely
grown, even
appreciate
just
that.
yeah, even in just the past couple of years, like the functionality they've added has been great. So
Mm.
hopefully they keep going. We'll see.
So is there a book or a series of books from your childhood that still resonates with you?
So I had seen that question. It's got me thinking because there's kind of two different. There's a book and there's a series, and the book it's called Space Wars, and it's a hardcover. It's only I don't know, maybe 80 pages, 100 pages. Like it's a thin book, but it's a hardcover, and it's kind of like an anthology, and it's kind of a ripoff of Star Wars
Mm,
because Space Wars and sort of a similar font, but not quite the same, and starships. And it's a book full of just science fiction stories of all different kinds. And some of them are prose, and some of them are like little short graphic novels. And it's just this weird mishmash of different styles of science fiction and modes of telling science fiction stories. And I had that for I don't know how long when I was a kid, but I must have read it. If I didn't read it at least 50 times, I don't know. Like I just carried that thing with me everywhere when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. And it was just my constant companion. And I still have a copy. It's down in my library here. And I should have brought it up to show because I love this book. But
mm,
that one really, I don't know where it came from. I don't know why it became one that was so important to me, but it really made me a sci-fi lover from a very early age. And just my whole life now, I've been a science fiction geek. So, you know, anytime superheroes or, outer space or aliens, like I am all over that. Time travel, bring it on,
yep,
just
yep.
right in my wheelhouse. So that was one that sort of formed a lot of my, what I think of as my reader's identity. But there was also the Hardy Boys.
Mm,
So back in first grade, second grade, my best friend brought in one of the Hardy Boys books. And he was like, "Oh my gosh, this book was so great. Oh man." I was like, "Can I borrow it?" He's like, "Sure." So he lent it to me and I read it and I gave it. I was like, "That was pretty good." So he had gone and gotten, I don't know, a bunch of them, not the whole series because there were like 60 of them, but he had
right.
gotten a spread of them. And so as he was finishing one, he would bring it in and I would read it and I'd give it back. And at some point, somehow, it became a competition. It became a competition of who can read them faster, and it became a competition of who can have more of them. So we both started like prowling the church flea markets and the yard sales and going to the store, and whenever we had that extra couple of bucks, we'd get the extra book, and then we'd furiously like stay up all night reading it to see if we could be the one to finish it first. And it was ridiculous and it was dumb, but it really sort of, something about that experience really made reading it, made it both social because it was this sort of semi-friendly competition. We got a little heated sometimes, but it had that social element to it. But it also sort of let me see that you can have a book that sort of follows a pattern, but the pattern's a little different each time. And like, I mean, the Hardy Boys books, they're pretty much the same book, over and over and over again, and you just tweak a
Right.
detail here and there. To my young brain, it was like, oh, this is really interesting. Like it's the same, but it's different. And it hadn't occurred to me up until that point that books could be the same, but different. And you could
Mm,
read something that was, I didn't have to keep reading that same science fiction book. I could get other science fiction books, I could find other things that were similar, but not the same. And so it sort of, in a way, broadened out my reading tastes, because you had the Hardy Boys and I was going through those, but then like right next to those, wherever you went, were the Nancy Drew books. So I read some Nancy Drew books. I was like, oh, similar but different. And then the Tom Swift books, which were like a sci-fi version of the Hardy Boys, and they were all sort of near each other in the bookstores. So it sort of, in reading the Hardy Boys, I also started reading these other things that were nearby, and those were, I mean, there was not a lot of young adult, or not even young adult, like there wasn't a lot of kids, like tween, teen, preteen
right.
literature out there at the time, So that was 1850s, that's where I lived for a while. But it really made me a reader. Like having
Mm,
these ongoing reading just made reading a part of my life in a way that it never had been before. I was a very reluctant reader up until that point. But reading these in competition made the practice of reading something I did all the time. Like at breakfast, in school, walking down the hall, I would read a book walking from class to class, like on the bus, like any place I could find that couple of minutes to read because I was trying to beat my friend. But that just became a part of every day. And so when
mm,
we were no longer doing that, reading was still an important part of what I did. And it's been a central part of my identity since I've been a kid. That's when my family talks about me, they talk about, oh yeah, Steve reads everything. So
right.
it really grew out of that weird friendly competition that started with the Hardy Boys. So I would say those were sort of my formative books.
What are you reading now?
Let's see. I just finished Neil Stephenson's book, Fall, or Dodge in Hell.
Mm,
Neil Stephenson writes these bricks of sci-fi books. And this one was really interesting. He wrote it a couple of years ago, but it starts out being about the internet, and there's a big chunk of it that's about what we believe online and how what we believe online shapes our real life actions, and how misinformation online is driving this divide. And in this book, he imagines in the future that there are literally city people who are like the rational, seeking out reliable source of information people. And then there's the other folks. He calls it Ameristan. And the
mm,
Ameristanis are into whatever they see online. And like algorithms have become so good at feeding you what you want to see that if you're not very careful about selecting reliable sources, you go down this crazy conspiracy rabbit hole that becomes your life. And like, because you get most of your information online, your whole world becomes conspiracies. And I'm reading this fiction book that came out a couple of years ago. I'm like, oh, this feels way too real right now. So very interesting ideas. It kind of zigs and zags into a whole bunch of different places. But that was an interesting, particularly interesting section of that book that I enjoyed.
excellent. Well, I want to thank you so much, Steve, for being on the podcast today. And for our followers, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. And again, thank you, Steve.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.